Hello, thank you for joining us. My name is Brian Lannon. Welcome to this webinar event. This is one of many such webinar-based professional development events brought to you by Texas Instruments Australia as part of our ongoing support for teachers in the classroom. This evening's webinar, Efficient Management of TI-Nspire, Enhancing Student Performance. Your presenters this evening are myself and Peter Fox. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Brian. How are you?
Going very well, thank you. I realised that I had your microphone muted there, so I'll jump back into my screen share. Now, Peter has been working with Texas Instruments for several years now and a very experienced presenter. This evening's event, a little bit different from most of our events in that it's not so much mathematics-based, but it's more based on getting started with the technology. So here we are, right at the start of term. The idea is taking a look at the various applications that are in the technology, things such as how to transfer documents between computer and the handheld units, and starting right from the start, what's actually in the box. We've got Peter taking you through that part of the show. There's our box, Peter.
All right. Well, let me tell them what's in the box. And let me also tell them that whilst Brian has sort of played down a little bit some of the stuff that we will cover, there's some pretty cool features that some of you may not know about, like widgets and so on, which we'll cover later in the session. And, of course, how do you get to programs from various documents and some pretty cool stuff. But let's unpack what's in the box to start with, because it's useful for teachers to know this. Often we've had our calculators sitting on our desk for quite some time, or we're just using the teacher software, and we kind of forget that the kids are opening this stuff up for the first time, and they have their eyes on one thing and one thing only, that being the calculator. They turn it on, and they're keen to get going, and they start pressing buttons, and who knows what happens to the rest. And there's some pretty important stuff in the rest of that. The first thing I want to show you is, well done, Brian, right on cue, is the extra warranty. Now, that's just something that the parents are interested in. So in Australia, the students can get an extra 2 years warranty by just registering their product online. You've still got to keep your receipt. That's still important as proof of purchase. But the URL is on the actual sticker on the box, and that will tell you and give you the instructions on how to get there. Then you just fill in the form. The actual identification stuff is on the back of the box and the calculator, so don't throw out anything until such time as you've registered that warranty. The next thing in the box, obviously the calculator, that's the bit that kids want to see. And strangely enough, from time to time we get a call to say we didn't get the slide case, the protective case. That's because in the box it's on the back of the calculator. The funniest one I've ever had was many, many years ago when someone said they couldn't turn one of our calculators off. And it was the plastic stuff on the screen which gave it the illusion that it was on, and they hung up quite embarrassed. But I said I wouldn't tell anyone. That's okay, right? But we do encourage students to put that slide case back on the front of the calculator before it goes in their bag, because 15 kilos worth of books coming down on a screen is never going to end well. It'll survive a few knocks and bashes, but chances are if you leave that slide case off all the time, then eventually your calculator will probably cop some damage. So make sure kids, last thing they do in class is slide that case back on. And some of the distributors that sell the calculators also sell a padded pouch, another good thing, because you can slide your cables inside those pouches as well. All right, next one.
The cables.
Yes, the cables. So the longer one, that's the one that connects to the calculator at one end, the small end obviously in the calculator, the large end in either a computer, or if they've bought the wall adapter, charge it, the other end also plugs into a wall charger. So that's use of that one. And if they lose them, these things can be bought cheaply. It's just a standard cable. You know, if you've got your old telephone cables going back as mobile phones did, that was an old mobile phone cable as well. But they can be bought online. They can be bought in most electronic stores still. All right, and the next cable that we'll see, just jump ahead there. Oh, they're the two ends that they should be looking for. Now, the next cable, that connects one calculator to another, but also if the school is getting things like an Innovator or they're getting a Rover, something like that, that's the cable that connects their Nspire calculator to another calculator or Innovator or Rover, those sorts of cool tools that they can get. And the last thing, and the one that often gets thrown out, is that little card there. Even though at the top it says, yeah, do not throw out, and it's sealed. You would think kids would want to know what's inside this stickered sealed bit. But they throw it out, and then they ring us up and say, can you tell me what my serial number is? We say, no, sadly we can't. So the serial number is kept inside there. I highly suggest, or strongly suggest rather, they take a photo of it. They take a photograph of that serial number, store the card safely, and everybody who's ever stored anything safely knows that's now gone, but the phone on your camera, the photo on your phone will still be there. So make sure you get a copy of your serial number. But once you've actually registered that, we can actually retrieve it. It takes a bit of time, but we can, as long as you've installed it and registered it. And Brian will show you shortly where you can download that software from our website. If you want to show them that now, you can do that now. Brian?
Yeah, this is the spot here. When you open up the first page, first of all, if you just put education.ti.com, chances are you will end up in Texas. You can see here my site is Australia, New Zealand, because I've set my computer to default to that. You can access the site through that tab there and nominate which one you want. Other than that, just Google Texas Instruments Australia. On the front page here, you can see I showed you here the link to the webinars, which we're in at the moment. But take a look over here where it says Downloads and Software. So it's through that part. It's one of several links that will take you to where the software can be downloaded.
That's right, because if they're using Nspire, they can even click on that big icon at the front that says 4.5, and they'll eventually get there too.
For the operating system, yeah. So this one I've highlighted here, that's the full version of the student software, ready for registration. If for some reason you haven't got that or you just want to give it a go, you can see the link below is a 30-day trial. And I'm just going to let you in on another little secret, because you guys as teachers, you can actually get a 90-day trial instead of a 30. Again, there's several ways you can get to that, but see the tab that I've highlighted here, Teachers. You've got a couple of things here, you know, curriculum resources, more lesson plans. The TI Codes lesson plans. Now, tonight's webinar is not on coding, but if you do want to do some coding, this is the best starting spot for you know, two different platforms here, as you can see, and then building to the Innovator if you wish. But through TI-Nspire here, the lessons are step-by-step online, but look what happens when I scroll down here. Teachers Lounge, and then below that, TI-Nspire CX Teacher Software free 90-day trial. So if any of your teachers or fellow staff members haven't yet got into the technology, this is the best place, I think, to get them started. So that way they just get it on their computer and they're good for 90 days, at the end of which, of course, you throw the computer out and get another one and do another 90 days, don't you, Peter?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So I think that's an important one to mention. It amazes me the number of students who, as Peter has said, discard that license and just work with the handheld, whereas the software is just so useful, if only for screen captures, if they're doing an assignment to capture what they've got on their calculator screen and drop it into a Word document or a report.
The other one that's good there, if you can jump back to the website for a second, Brian.
Yep.
They haven't closed them off. If they've lost their software, or some kids get calculators second-hand, the hand-me-downs, whatever it might be, or it might be a school one that they're using, they can also get computer link software. You can go into products and software and find that as well.
You can get it through the product or even through the software here.
I think you can get it through the software page. That would make a lot of sense. Certainly you can get under products and software, and you can just
I know it's under
click on the computer link software. Yeah.
I'll get it under products.
And the other spot as well, one of the most famous ways to find it is you just Google TI-Nspire computer link software, and strangely enough, we're the only company that does that computer link software. And there it is down there. You can see 1, 2, about the fifth item down. Now, the advantage of that software is it's free, and this is what I encourage schools to do, is just install that on every single student laptop. Because that way the kids can take screenshots, they can charge their calculator via the computer, and they can transfer files. So if the teachers put a file up on some sort of file share server, then they can just drag and drop that onto their calculator using that software. And it doesn't require a license. There's no renewal stuff, nothing. You can just install it and run with it. It's a bit like Acrobat Writer sort of thing. It's free. You can just put it on every single machine.
Yep.
And as it says there, you can update the operating system.
Yes, which we will get to by the end of this webinar, about how to update your operating system. And also all this talk about files and documents, we'll just take a step back and see how the calculator is set up, and what the files and documents are, and how that is saved, a little bit like a computer document, like say a Microsoft Word document, how that can be moved around and copied from one device to another. So firstly, in the keyboard layout, whether you're using the software or whether you're using the calculator, and I'm just going to quickly show the software so that you see what I mean by that. This is how I run the software when I'm demonstrating in a class. So you see here the calculator on the left is kind of chopped off. It doesn't have the screen above. I can make it show the screen above. So there's the whole thing. So you've got the keys, you've got the display screen. But for presenting to a class up on the big board, it's best to show them a magnified view of the screen. I don't see the point having it twice, so I usually set this up like this. Okay. So jumping back to that PowerPoint, the layout in the keyboard is up the top here. You've got these navigation keys. You can see the arrow keys to move around. You've got a very important key is that blue one. That's the control or second function key. And you see written above the other keys in blue, that's what the second function is. For example, if I wanted to turn the calculator on, I'll hit the key top right. If I wanted to turn it off, I'll press Control and then on to access.
Which is always a good tip too. I know that sounds trivial, but kids tend to just leave them on and wait for them to power down, whereas doing Control and off at the end of a lesson actually extends the life between battery charges, so they don't have to charge it as frequently.
Yes, a fairly useful one. Well, the same goes with your phones or anything really. To know to do that. Yeah. The tab key, I tend to use that a fair bit because that will jump between sections in a dialog box. So jump from one option to another. And Control, so you can see here the menu key, that's a very important one because in the various applications, each menu is specific to the application, but then there's more menu options if you go Control and then Menu. It's a little bit like, I think of it being like a right mouse click on a computer. Keys below, fairly straightforward. as you would have on a numeric calculator and scientific calculator. Perhaps what's a bit more interesting here is the variable key when we set up variables, because this has a full computer algebra system. We have, if you've lost any commands and you're not sure where in the menu systems they are, this book here is a catalogue of the whole lot. Just to the left of it, this key here is for templates. It will set up things such as indices of all sorts. It'll set up hybrid functions. It sets up logarithms to any base you like. A template for differentiation, a template for integration. That's all through there, so that's a very useful one. And also here's some other shortcuts. If you like to, if you've got your handheld at the moment, try Shift and then plus and see what happens with your shortcuts. It'll actually drop you in one of those templates. Okay, down below, and the alpha keyboard, a few other little pieces in there. This key here will get you to some of the other punctuation symbols. And there they are. And this one over here will get you to pi and a few others. So we've got complex I and exponential and a few other bits and pieces. Infinity, useful one. And of course you've also got your degrees and minutes there. And I won't go further there because that's Foxy's stuff. But I'll switch back to you, Foxy, to tell us more about that.
Yep.
I shall. So Foxy's now going to take us into, in further detail, what each of those applications are. Actually, just before you do that, Foxy, can I just talk about this bit? So I've stopped my sharing now. I'll jump back. Because, again, I've seen both teachers and students alike do this in perhaps what I possibly think not the most efficient manner. When you turn your calculator on, you generally go to the top right here, the house. Okay, so it's the home key. And the number of times, I wouldn't mind $1 for every time I've been assisting a student where I said, show me your calculations, and they're working in the scratch pad, and I try to drop in, say, for example, some statistical analysis, but the scratch pad is great for quick calculations. So I can go into this, and I can do something like this. Yep, that's all good. I also have menus available, but the menus are limited, so I don't get all of the good gear that I can get in some of the other in a full document. And I can't, for example, if I hit the dock here, you can see I can't insert all the different sorts of pages. And if I go into the page layout, I've got nothing special there. So they're not. It's a cut down. The scratch pad is good for short calculations, but it's really not using the full power of the calculator. What
the one
I
bonus
encourage,
you've got,
yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say there while you're on
Yep.
that, Brian, the one bonus that they do have, if you find your students in Scratchpad and they realise they really wanted to save that for next lesson, there is the option to file and save to current document.
Yes.
So therefore, if they've done some calculations, they can actually effectively save what they've done into the current document and then save the current document.
There we are there.
Yep. So there you go. It's got the option to a new document or the current one.
Yep. So I encourage people to become more accustomed to using the full documents over here. And probably the first thing you might want to do is go to a new document. Now watch what happens. When I selected new document, it's thrown up this dialog, do I want to save the unsaved document from before? And you can see that before this webinar I had was working here, and I was just checking to see if 4 plus 2 still added up to 6. So that was already current in the random access memory of the calculator, and I don't particularly want to save it, so I say no. If I did want to save it, if I said yes, I would have to give it a name and save it in the file management system. So when I've gone into no, it's then saying what application type do I want to add in. Foxy's going to elaborate on these, but look, I've got 9 available here. This is where I like to add pages and add applications. So I could add a graphs application, for example. If I wish to add another application, my practice is to go Control, and then remember I said you'll get the blue option here, Document. That brings up plus page. So that's that dialog. I do know that a lot of people, by preference or by habit, go back to the home page and put an application in here. So, for example, a spreadsheet application. Fine, but the problem is you haven't got the whole lot. See here, you've only got 7 applications, whereas inside the current document, if I add a page, there's 2 more, widgets and program editor, which are both very useful. Okay, I'll send you across to Foxy to tell you a bit more about those applications.
And just while Brian's transferring that across to myself, if you want a good laugh and you're working with the students and you're a bit like me, maybe why I'm not teaching anymore, when you say tell the students to tell the calculator to save it, and you say just say save it, tell them to speak into the USB port on the top. And kids will do it. There's this expectation with Siri and Google and all of these other things now that it won't, but it's funny watching the kids and their expectation that Siri's on board or something like that.
Yes.
All right, I think you can all see my screen now. So these are the applications that Brian was showing you. And down the bottom it describes and it says, well, add a calculator to whatever your current document is called. And of course, the first one is a calculator application. Now, there are several spots where you can do calculations, including in notes. So what's different about the calculator application itself? Well, that's because it holds a history. When this thing was first being developed, we talked about whether or not this space would be dynamic. And therefore, if you changed the definition somewhere, would it redo all the calculations, which was possible. But as mathematicians, we said, no, we actually want kids to be able to explore. So what if they had some function, let's say f of x defined, and then they experimented with it, and then they wanted to change it to explore something else? Well, if that new definition changed it retrospectively, they would lose that history. So it's been kept that way on purpose. If you want that, you'll see shortly that you can still have it. So we've kind of given you both options. But the calculator space is where you can scroll through the history of everything the kid's done. So I'm going to move across to a calculator and do a new document and add a calculator. On the top of here we see 1.1, that's problem number 1, page 1, and we have a calculator application. Now we can just use it as a calculator if we want to. So let's say I wanted the inverse sign of a half, and I can see that the answer is pi on 6. Let's see what happens if we did that a slightly different way and said solve, and I can just type it in. Now I'm typing this in because I'm using a computer and it's just as fast to type it that way as it is to pick it up on the calculator. So I'll find the solutions to sine x equals a half. And right there is a teaching moment. Now I know we're all strapped for time, but this is a wonderful opportunity to talk about, well, why didn't that first one produce all of those solutions? I said I wanted the inverse sine of a half, so it gives us the opportunity to talk about the domain and that sine x and inverse sine of x are not exactly just opposites to each other, that one's doing something different, and that one actually has a domain restriction on it, that being inverse sine, and we'll see shortly how you might do some of those sorts of things. The other thing that's pretty cool on here is we can define functions, as I said before. So I'm going to define something really simple, like f of x, our most common function, equal to x squared. Now, a good friend of mine does it this way, is he says, you know what, I quite often want to use that. One of the most common things I'm going to do is graph it. And you'll see in a moment that defining it as f1 of x is actually very handy, and we'll see the difference as well. The other thing that I'll point out here, as Brian mentioned, I can see all the things that I already have defined within this problem, within this document. So f and f1 of x. All right, let's go back to here, and we'll have a look at the next one being the graph application. And you can see we're heading towards that treasure chest at the end. Brian's going to reveal what's hidden in there towards the end. I'll give you a brief rundown, and Brian will go into more detail on it.
Is that a cue for pirate jokes?
What was that, sorry?
I was just wondering, is that a cue for pirate jokes?
It could be. Could be.
I'll let you continue.
I better think of one between now and the end. All right. Excuse me if I go off and Google
chat
pirate
window,
jokes.
everyone.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, no. That could be dangerous. They've started something. All right, so in the graph entry section, when the kids are in the graph application, we've got functions, and the next one is relation. Now, if students, and Brian's going to show you later how to upgrade the operating system, if students have got an older calculator, and they could have one that's 6 or 7 years old, and it still works perfectly well, and will still take the current operating system, but they may not have access to relations. So they need to make sure they update their calculator. Now, as Brian suggested, I'm going to do a Control-I, and we'll put in option number 2, a graph application. Interesting. It started at F2. Either it can't count or it thinks there's already something defined in F1. Of course it is. So when I defined F1 of x in the calculator application on the previous page, it's automatically put it in here. And I think that's actually quite handy, that you can just press enter and it will automatically graph whatever function you've defined as F1 or F2 or whatever other functions that you've defined, it's automatically in there. I'll press the tab key, which is our favorite, and you'll see that the pages are actually linked, because if I press variable, you can see it's remembered, oh, you've got some functions defined within this problem, such as f of x. Now at the moment, it looks like we've got the same thing done twice, but you can see they're written slightly differently. And you see this one, yeah, it's kind of, I can't do anything with it. And the worst thing is, F1's right underneath it, but there's a clue, that famous tab key, which I'll press now, and then I've got graph of F1, and I can change it. So depending on how you've defined these things, you can make it so they're kind of locked up and not flexible, or they are. And again, you can see it's pointing to graph 2, our famous tab key, gives us access to F1, and the double arrows means that I can translate that. And those funny little side arrows means I can do a dilation. That's kind of cool that I can see my original function up here, which I defined in F2, and the one that I've transformed down here. And there's so many other things we can do, and I'm going to spend a lot of time in each application, just enough to let you know that they exist, and what sorts of things you might want to do, and they're linked to all the other ones. There's equation templates, so if you've got, say, some conic sections are popular in there, different ways to represent a linear function and so on, all within those templates. Parametric equations, polar, scatter plots, that should have said scatter plots, not scalar plot, sequences, and differential equations, which the teachers up in Queensland will love because they've just started working on those, I believe, and same with New South Wales, doing differential equations now as well. Geometry, one of the most underspoken and underused applications ever. Sure, we can draw shapes. Certainly we can do transformations, reflections, dilations, and all sorts of things in there, which we should be doing so kids actually get a better understanding of dilations and transformations of functions. And we can do measurements. But we can do cool stuff with measurements. So this time I'm going to do control and page. Another one that Brian suggested, and we'll put in a geometry application. You can see across the top of my page now it says 1.3. So I've got 3 applications running on 3 different pages within problem number 1. I'm just going to take a quick bo peep at those. The one on the left is my calculator application on page 1. Then my graph application on page 2, and my geometry application on page 3. And I can navigate to any one of them just using the arrow keys and press enter. Now I said we could draw shapes. Let's draw a triangle. That's pretty easy. Press escape to release the triangle tool so I don't keep drawing triangles everywhere. And I can translate it, I can transform it. And I'm going to do something that Brian said before, and it is press a control menu, which gives me access to a contextual menu. On my computer, if I put the mouse over the top of it, same as on a calculator, I can do things to that object, like measure the length, which by default will be its perimeter. You can use the measurement tool to measure a side length as well. So if I change the shape, of course our perimeter changes. And watch this, again, a right mouse click, and I'm going to change the attributes. You think, what sort of attributes? Well, I could display more decimal places or less. I'm going to lock it. And what that means, you can see the padlocks now on, is that it will not change area. That is, that triangle now has a defined area. It's called constraint geometry, so that it cannot go past 44.5. It will stay on that. If I try and move that point up or down, it doesn't move, but I can see it's wiggling a bit from side to side, so let's let it move from side to side. And we're going to ask the student, so what's going on if I let that triangle stay with a constant perimeter? What sort of path will that follow? Not sure? Well, then we can do this. Let's just do a little geometry trace. Some older mathematicians or math teachers might remember doing that with a 2 pencils and or 2 compasses or whatever and some string and tracing out an ellipse and understanding that while that length there is fixed and my perimeter is fixed, then that plus that must also be constant, which is essentially our definition for the formation of our ellipse. So we can construct things. Nah, you might be doing something at a junior level. Here's a little shortcut you might want to remember. Control Z, and you can just keep on going back there. Or under Menu and Actions, you can delete all.
It's handy that a lot of the Microsoft ones work, don't they?
Yeah.
Control C, Control V, Control Z.
Yeah. Control S to save and so on. We'll draw another little triangle. This time, rather than measure the perimeter, I'll measure the area. And again, we'll lock it up. We'll change its attributes, lock it up, and ask ourselves, so how can that move now? It's not going to trace out an ellipse. It's kind of boring. It just moves like that. Let's, again, trace it. And we're going to ask ourselves, well, what things are changing about this triangle and what's staying the same? Well, I know that these 2 side lengths here and here, they're changing. And all the angles in the triangle are changing. The base is not changing, and neither is the area. But there's one other thing that students need to figure out that's not changing. And the clue here, of course, is that this line or set of dots is parallel to this side. And therefore, our altitude or height is also constant. And then we can talk about putting that inside a rectangle and seeing that it doesn't matter where we put that triangle in the rectangle or even out of the rectangle. Its area will remain constant because its base and height are constant. So hopefully people can see that the geometry is not just about measuring the size of something. You can actually get students to learn from that space. And that's the other thing we want teachers to understand, is that the calculator is a learning tool as much as it is a calculating device. And that's sometimes why you'll hear it referred to as a handheld rather than just a calculator, because a calculator has implications that that's all you do is calculations. Spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are really cool. I'm a little bit worried that we don't use spreadsheets enough. I used them I had a weaker group of students, and most of them had no ambition to go on and do Year 12 maths, but we still did a lot of the stuff on the spreadsheets because they could end up doing spreadsheet work in almost any business that they end up in. So I felt that it was important that students needed to know about formulas and so on within a spreadsheet. And this is working the same as a regular spreadsheet. So let me do a really simple one. I could put in a formula, but to start off with, let's do a pattern. I'm just doing 1 and 2 in the first 2 cells, and the same as what you would do on a computer. You can hold down the Shift key to highlight the first 2. Now here's what I do on a computer. I can just click and drag by grabbing a hold of that corner. That's hardest to do on a handheld. Keep that in mind when you're teaching. Some of the stuff you do on the computer is easier than it is on a handheld. Here, the menu's actually easier. Oops, I pressed the document one instead of the menu. There we go. And under data, there's an option to fill. And there's only one direction we're going here, and that's down. So it fills in the numbers 1 through to 10. It's picked up the pattern. But if I change this to a 5, nothing else changes. It doesn't update the pattern. But if I press equals and I type in the same as I would if I was on Excel, equals A1 plus 1, press enter, and then I'll just fill that down. Now changing this updates it as you would expect. And if you're wondering, do absolute cell references work? Yes, they do. Do we have counter-if statements? Absolutely. If statements, yep. Most of those common spreadsheet commands are in here. The other thing that's really cool about this is that you can go up here and you can name this. So I'm going to call this data. Not very creative, I know. Oh, I shouldn't have named it there. Let me just do Control Z. I wanted to go one further up. My keyboard was a bit slow to respond here on the webinar. So I've called my list data. Now, in here, I'm going to say that that equals A. There's another cool thing. It does algebra. But I'm going to go back here, all the way back to my calculator page, and I said this stuff was linked. I'm going to make A equal to 5. I wonder what data looks like now. What if I make A equal to 20? Magic. Of course, all it's doing is updating between this calculator application and the spreadsheet application. You can see it's changed.
Because they're all dynamically linked, yes.
Correct. And hopefully now people understand what it means to be dynamically linked. Now, the spread application normally feeds into our data and statistics. I haven't got a lot of data in there at the moment, but you can use this to analyze box plots, lines of regression, and so on. You can change points, or another cool tip, just in case you're wondering, if you've got some data, now I know there's a lot of teachers that work with data, you can go like this. That means that that list will now be locked. You can't change it. Let me see what happens if I try and force a change. It says your variable is locked. You can't change it. Now, if you can't remember the word lock or don't want to type it in, it's hidden under there in the Actions menu, and you can figure out how you would unlock that variable. Not rocket science, is it? And if your variable names are long, then you can pick it up from there. You can see it's even got a tiny little padlock drawn on it. No.
That var key is very, very useful for quickly accessing and checking these things.
Yeah. So your data and statistics application, you can move points on there, and because it's linked, it will change the data, so be wary. But that lock menu is very handy for that. And the next one is the Notes application. Now, notes application, we can type text. Nobody really wants to type too much text on the calculator. Kids are pretty quick at it. I'm not. However, you can put maths in there as well. So, if I insert it now, it will go in between page 1.1 and 1.2. So I'm going to do that just to demonstrate. Notes. So you can see it's popped it in there. It's pushed all the other ones out the way. And now my page 1.2 is a notes application. So
how do I know it's a notes page instead of a calculator page, Peter?
Question. Now, it used to be on the calculator application that you could see a little history line down here, and they took that away. So the fastest way is just that menu, and look at that, as Brian mentioned before.
Exactly. Because that button will access different options depending on which application you are in.
That's it. So let's insert a math box. Now you notice mine also says maths. It's spelled correctly. That's because when I selected my language, I chose UK English, the correct spelling of the word maths.
Good.
I won't start that one. All right, so if I put some sort of function in here, and I'm going to define it, same as I did before. I love that option to define. Define it as f of x equals, let's do x squared. We'll do the famous one, 5x plus 6. I think almost everybody's done that one to death. Oh, and if you want some fun with students, change it to x squared plus 6x plus 5, and half of them will tell you that you can't factorise it. It's interesting. And f of x. Done. And we'll factor. F of x. Now I could have just picked up f of x from the variable menu. Oops. We don't need the word
factor.
Factor. Yep. Just did that to demonstrate the difference between italic and non-italicized. Wasn't recognised.
There we go.
A comma x to ensure that I get factors even if they're not rational. And another one which some people are not knowledgeable about but is in there, and I think it's under the algebra menu, complete the square on f of x. Handy one. See things in turning point. There it is there. That's all well and good. Let's go back here and change that to a 6 and a 5.
5. But then you can't factorise it, can you?
Yeah, that's what it was correct. For whatever reason, and I've done this for quite a while, when that number is one more than that, they miss the one and the, like, they are factors. So yes, it works.
Yep.
So you can see, change the expression at the top and everything else flows on, and you'll see other webinars throughout the year that have that sort of information about them, which is kind of cool. The next one, which we won't do tonight in terms of any data logging because it takes a bit of time, is the data quest application. So that's where you can put sensors in and connect maths and science and do, let's call it STEM, shall we, where the M is included. Now it's time for these gems. Brian's going to give you some details on these gems. I'll introduce them and Brian will take over. The first one we've got hidden in the box there is the programming one. It gives you a clue because noughts and ones, binary stuff, looks like a punch card. Oops, sorry about that. So that's where we can do, you like the way that came out of the treasure chest? That was so nice. Yeah, so coding or programming. I don't know why it's called coding now. It's the key word. Don't call it programming, otherwise you won't get any funding to do it. And to me, that the coding or the programming should be as much as part of a solution in many cases as number, algebra and calculus, because some problems need coding to help solve them. So that's one little gem that's hidden in the box. And there's another one. Oh, a widget. So Brian's going to tell us a bit more about widgets, but essentially they're the ability to save an application or group of applications in a single page. Now, normally we can't bring them into another document, but a widget allows us to. So technically you can have up to 4 pages. If you squish them down, you can put up to 4 pages or 4 applications applications rather, onto one widget, and you save it, open that widget in another document, and that's a really powerful thing that kids are using in exams. And the last one, which not many of you will have seen before, is the question application. The students don't get that one. That one's a special teacher one. You can use it for formative or summative assessment. If you're using Navigator, that's how you write questions for students to answer. But even if you're not using the Navigator system, you can write a question and have that document transferred to students' calculators, and when they answer it, it will tell them whether they got the answer right or wrong. So you're probably thinking, where on earth do I find that? Well, it's not on the calculator because it's not something you can do from the calculator. I'll hit the Insert option. It's only available on Teacher or Navigator software. The students do not get this one. And there it is there, Insert Question. And we get to choose what type of question that we want to insert. I'm going to do a very quick multiple choice sort of a thing. And we can type our question in here with the responses here. And over in our little toolbox here, we tell it which one is the correct answer. Students do not see this bit over here because they don't get that option on their software or their handheld. And under question properties, if you don't have access to Navigator but you'd like to write some revision quizzes, and I'll put Lennon there as the author. And we could make it copyright, put a year on it and so on, click OK. And now if I was to send this to students' calculators, they can actually respond to that question, and it'll put a tick or a cross on the page when they ask it to check answers. And that's pretty cool. So you can see I've got lots of pages and applications open in this document. And the only other thing I haven't done, and we're just about out of time for my session, is to show you a new problem. So all of that lovely stuff I did before, you can see the numbers changed here. By the way, that's the pointer key. That's not the calculator flipping you the bird, just making sure everyone understands that. Look, no variables, they're gone. Well, the same as in the textbook. If x equals, there's a lovely cartoon for this that, you know, the teacher sort of writes x equals 3 on the board and just hand it and goes, but yesterday you told us x equals 2. So, yeah, that's the same sort of thing here. We've started a new problem, and even though we had some variable names here, they don't exist in problem number 2. And all of this is in one document, which I can do Control-S and save it to my documents the same as I would on a computer, and transfer it to my computer if I want to. Now, I'm sorry, Brian, I've gone a little bit over time there, but I'll transfer back to you and I'll answer some of those questions that are queuing up there.
There are a few. One there concerning about the software. Will it work on Mac? And there is a version that can be downloaded for that. I'm just... Okay. So I shall grab it back.
Yeah, while you're grabbing that back, Brian, the other questions we've had, so yes, it works on a Mac. Does it work on an iPad? Well, no, software doesn't work on iPads, but we do have an iPad app. Another teacher asked recently, does it work on a Chromebook? Well, Chromebooks are kind of like Google's answer to an iPad. They don't run applications, well, sorry, they don't run software either, so exe files, Word, Excel, all of those sorts of things. No, they don't. They do if you're online, as in some of the Office stuff, you can buy a license to use it online, and that works. But no, Chromebooks don't run software as such. They run apps much like a phone does. It's like a big phone that doesn't have a calling feature. And the same as an iPad, it's like a big phone that doesn't have a calling feature. So yes, but we do have an iPad app, and we don't have an Android app yet. Okay, so your spin, Brian.
Thank you for that. Yes, I'm just going to quickly go over. You may have noticed, and Peter did make reference to it, these numbers up the top, 1.1, 1.2, and you saw on my calculator before, I had my 1.1 was a graphs page, or graphs application. My page 1.2 had the spreadsheet application, and remember the way I like to add more pages with applications is I've gone Control plus Page. I'm going to add a calculator, and here's my calculator just to prove it. So I've got my 3 applications here. I think you also saw Peter show that if you go Control and then this Up key, you can see all 3 pages here. So we also made use of that variables key. I'm just going to set up in my, just by way of example, on my graphs page, I'm going to say f1 of x equals, say, 2x. Simple. I could go into the spreadsheet page, and I could talk about something like input, and I could talk about output. Actually, I did define this before, which is why it's there. So what I did is I've said that the output equals the f1 of the input. So I've got all those. Whoops. Yeah, I'll do that. So it's linking back to what was set up on this previous application. Over here on my calculator page, I could in fact take the f1 of, I don't know, what's your favourite number, 78, and there it is. So it's remembered that f1 means to double things. Now, all of those variables are available if I look in my VAR, under my VAR key. But what's this 1.1.1 point? What's going on there? Well, you can see that the variables are linked, but let's say I want to do some more work, but I want to change the names of those. I want to change, reassign those variables. I want to, for example, and one that's often suggested, if students are working through an exam, they might want to use this bit here, 1.1.1 point, for question 1. So they've, in this stage, got a graph, a spreadsheet, a calculator page as they work through question 1. Question 2 is a separate event in their exam, so they don't want to confuse any of those variables. Here's the trick. See, I've got under document here, I can insert. I could insert a new page. You've seen me do that. And Control-I is the shortcut. But I can insert a new problem. Let's say I want to do another calculator. So now I'm up to page 2.1. This means page 1 of problem number 2. So it's a calculator once again. Okay, there it is. But if I hit the var key, those variables don't exist. If I try to F1 of, what did we do, 78, it just tells me F1 78 because the variables aren't linked. So this is the critical hierarchy for using the whole system, that the documents, so if you think of a Venn diagram and subsets, so each document which can be saved as a file, so a document consists of multiple problems, and the problems can consist of multiple pages. The pages themselves can consist of multiple applications if you have split pages. So that's the hierarchy from document to problem to page to application. And if I wanted to save this, you can see the asterisk there for doc, meaning that this is not yet saved. I can, through the document and file, I can go to Save As, and I can give this a name. I'm just going to go up a folder here. You can see I'm in the My Documents bit here, and I'm going to call it, we're going to say WebFeb, giving it this is a February webinar, and I can save that, and that's saved into my file management system. On another day, I come along, I want to look at that. I go into My Documents, and I look for WebFeb. I can, of course, save that under a different hierarchy if I wanted. You can see here my TAFE engineers last year. I've got a document in here. If I have a look, a page here on, a calculation on Young's modulus. So that's opened up there. Okay, and that's an example of a notes page. Okay, I'll just quickly show you some of those gems that Foxy was talking about. Here's this other document I was playing with before. what is it, 4 plus 2 equals 6, that's good. Let's say all of a sudden I might want something that will do me a three-dimensional calculation of Pythagoras' theorem, but I don't want to lose this work. Now here's the big difference between software that us teachers conveniently use and the handhelds that the students tend to be more restricted to. I can open a number of things here. Here's my current document, 4 plus 2 equals 6. I can flick back to Young's modulus here. That's all very nice. If the students don't have the luxury of opening up more than one document at a time, and you can understand quite rightly their reluctance, particularly during a test or exam, if they wanted to open up something that they've saved in the My Documents, their reluctance is because if they do open it, it's going to wipe this working here unless that's separately saved. Wouldn't it be nice to just slide in one page of something else that was useful without upsetting this? So that's what's called a widget. I'm just going to show you how that works. So I'm going to, rather than go to My Documents, go to Add a Page, 8th option, Add a Widget. I don't know if you can hear the magpies in the background. They're making a bit of a racket.
That's only half the racket we'll make during the season.
Remember, these last two options, options 8 and 9, aren't available through the Happy House home page. So add a widget here. Now, on your calculator, if you've just tried to do that, chances are you probably only had one, and it was this, stopwatch. You can see that my list of widgets contains a lot more, and I'll just quickly show you how. Here's the stopwatch one. This came with the operating system when widgets were added, okay? So that was the example. Cool. But in itself, fairly limited. It's just a stopwatch. I've got a whole lot more widgets, and I'll just show you the Pythagoras one I was talking about. Yeah. But why didn't it like that?
Oh, because some of those variables are already defined, it's saying.
Oh, okay, yep.
You could probably do it if you do it in another problem.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to do another problem.
So it's just, it doesn't want to override what you might already have, so it's a safety valve, I guess.
Yep. I didn't think I had those variables, to be honest, but that's what's going on. And we're familiar with this sort of problem. What's the length of the stick in the box of various dimensions? So I'm using sliders here on a geometry page or a geometry application. The page actually has two applications. You can see below, here's the calculation for that length. Length of the diagonal is this. But a bit unconvinced here. This is a notes page, but I'm a bit unconvinced because it's actually not doing the calculation for me. The reason for that is that when the notes page was stored as a widget, it didn't evaluate the variables, even though it's taken the variables from this page here, of this application here. I'm going to show you a trick. Go to the application at the bottom. That's our notes page, and go Control and then A. What that's done is it's selected it all. I could have taken you through a menu for that, but I've used a shortcut in this instance. Control A is selected.
Which is fine. It's a Windows shortcut as well.
There you go. Yep. And through the menu, Actions, Evaluate. So that's now evaluated that. So this is a great example of one page, two applications. The application up top, geometry page with sliders, and the application at the bottom is a notes page. They are combined together or grouped together. I'll just quickly show you how we can ungroup. If I go to the document and the page layout, you can see here that I can ungroup. So it's going to ungroup the two pages here. So I now have one application on page 2.1, that's our geometry. The other application on page 2.2, that's the notes page, which once again you know how to evaluate. If I do wish to group these two pages, I go to the page first of the pair that I wish to group, and once again back through the document, page layout, and group. Okay, I can also change the way it's done, whether it's side by side or up and above. We're over time now, Foxy. I was going to quickly show the
Update the OS.
Update OS, yep. The other application that we've done there is the program editor. We will leave that for another time, but quickly, an important one is updating the operating system. We've shown you where the link cables are and the appropriate software for linking between handheld and your computer software. Back to the Texas Instruments website. Often it's actually one of the early links right on the front. The person who manages this page is Foxy, so I think he's keeping that there pretty permanently, aren't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
And the
that and the
current
84
operating
one obviously comes up.
Yep. The current operating system is a 4.5 version, so if you hit on the update now, what that will do is take you to this in the shortcut. I showed you before where the downloads are, so you can download through here the upgrades. So that's the other way. If it's not from the front page, go to Downloads, Upgrades, and it's the same thing, and look at which version you've got. So what happens is that you would download the software or the upgrade software locally to your computer, and then use the link to link that across to your handheld. What I suggest you do is upgrade one handheld first of all, and then go from one handheld to the other. I'll just quickly show you here. If you're on a handheld and you're in My Documents, this is the area where you can send individual files and also upgrade operating systems. In the menu, you can see, so this is the menu you get when you've gone to My Documents. Fixed option send, of course it's not allowing that because this isn't a handheld. What you're seeing is the computer software, and the same thing here, send operating system. But if you look at that on your own handheld, you can see that that is possible, and what you do is you simply link one handheld to the other through that calculator cable we showed you at the start. When you're going from computer to handheld, this is what we do here. So you can see here that what that has done is it's brought up my computer, and you can plug in your handheld down here, and it's just simply a matter of drag and drop. You would do the File Explorer as you would on your computer, Content Explorer, go to your computer, look for where you've downloaded that software, and drag it across. In this case, Young's module, so I can drag and drop to my calculator. We've gone over time there, Foxy.
We have. Just one more thing. Yep. Oh, sorry, I was just going to show them one more thing. Have you still got that software open? Yeah. Yep. One for teachers is the class option. If you have a look, there's a menu there. I think it's Tools, rather. That's just up the top. Tools. Top. Keep going up. Yep. They're the ones. And Transfer Tools. Control, Shift, and T. And then if you select what file you want to transfer, that being the operating system for the calculator, and we won't do it now, but you go onto your computer, select the operating system and hit Start Transfer. The bonus of this one is every time a kid connects the calculator, it automatically starts a transfer and lets you know when it's finished. If you've got a docking station, plug it in and you can send 10 OSs at once, or just keep them going through the class. You don't have to keep on going File, Send, OS. it sends them all until such time as you hit stop. Pretty cool.
Yep. Because in mine's set up as the navigator, but that can work too. Yep.
Yeah. The transfer tool is a teacher one. It's not on the kids one either.
Yep. Thanks for that one, Foxy. And thank you again for your input to the this evening's webinar. Reminder that now is your opportunity to type in any last-minute questions to Foxy. When we do exit the webinar, you'll be taken to a page where we invite your feedback. So please tell us of the broad amount of material that we covered this evening, if what you would like to see in future webinars in greater detail, or even the face-to-face PD events. Within a couple of days, you will be receiving your PD certificate and also a copy of the PowerPoint that we demonstrated to you. And of course, you can watch the whole thing again, share it with your students if you like, either on demand, that's the link there, through the on-demand part of the Texas Instruments website, or our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for TI Australia. The newsletter, if you haven't already subscribed, that is the link, and you can also hit that through our website. Website's the best portal for all of these things. The phone numbers, that one there, if you phone the Australian one, you'll actually end up probably talking to Foxy. And so, with all of that done, wish you all a final good night. Thank you again, Peter.
That's right. One other thing, Brian, we did promise him this. Why couldn't the pirate play cards? Because he was sitting on the deck.
Of course.
Pirate joke. Sorry.
Yes. And because you know why they are in fact called pirates, don't you?
No.
It's because they are.
Oh, they are.
Yes.
I think that's all for tonight,
Goodbye.
Brian. Goodbye.